were not allowed in the synagogue. They were considered unclean, just like a leper. I read a kind of an amusing story from history. A Roman writer once wrote that he went to a village and saw a monument to an honest tax collector. Now what's funny about that man is that his profession was so renegade and so bad, when you finally ran across an honest man, they made a statue to him. Because he was the exception, certainly not the rule. And it said he was very, very rich, and he would be, because Jericho was a very important town. It wasn't that big of a town, but it set at a very important spot. If you go to Israel, I've been to Jericho, if you go to Israel, it sits down in the Jordan River Valley, and as you come across the river, there's one pass. Actually, it's called the Ascent of Blood. It goes about 18 miles through the mountains up to Jerusalem. It was the main way to get out from one side of the country up to the mountains to Jerusalem. So all the trade had to go through there, particularly what they called balsam wood, which they sold out of there. And it was a very wealthy city, and he made a lot of money. And in doing that, he became a success in his profession and probably the most hated person in Jericho. Now, when you look at the story, I get an impression here. I'm going to read a little bit in here, but I think it's true. Zacchaeus was very successful, it tells us that, but he doesn't seem to be a very happy person. He chose a profession to get rich, but in doing so, he made himself an outcast. And I think we can be pretty sure, based on what we see in the story, that God the Holy Spirit had convicted him of all his evil ways. So here's a little guy who'd been successful, he got what he wanted, but he had no self-respect, he was lonely, he was an outcast, he had a guilty conscience, and now he had to try to live with it, and everybody hated him. You know, we've all heard the saying, money can't buy happiness, right? You all heard that. Do we believe it? Did you hear about that lady in Florida a few weeks ago? Something won $250 million or $270 million in the lotto or something like that. Almost enough to tempt me to go out and spend a buck, you know. I didn't do it. Almost enough to tempt me to do it. And if you hear that, I don't care who you are, you say, wow, $270 million. Man, what can I do? Man, I don't need to, and I had 27. If I had 2.7, you know, we start thinking, wow, if I had that kind of money, you know. You say about Dr. Weeder, let's be honest. All right, let's say, I always pick on birds, so I'll pick on Sam today. Let's say Sam, he got, you know, he couldn't resist the temptation. He went down and bought a lottery ticket and won $270 million. Okay? And you come to me and say, well, Dr. Weeder, what would you do if Sam wanted to tithe that money to the church? You know? I would say the devil's had it long enough. Go ahead and give it to the church. Sam, I would take that money. But the point of the matter is simply this. You know, money's important. It's necessary. We all wish we had more of it. But I think it's really true in many ways. Money can't buy happiness, I guess, depending on how you define happiness. And I'm sure that Zacchaeus was rich, and he found out there are things money can't buy. It can't buy peace. It can't buy a good relationship with another person. It can't buy really true happiness. Now, even you kids probably have heard of Andrew Carnegie, the guy who, the great philanthropist of the last century, gave all the money to build all the Carnegie libraries all over the country. I read a quote by him that really, and of course he knew many, many, many rich people. He made a statement I read one time that really struck me. He said, millionaires seldom smile. Isn't that an interesting statement? And John D. Rockefeller, who at one time was the richest man in the whole United States, also made a statement. He said, the poorest man I know is the man who has nothing but money. Now you say, well, they can say that because they had money. But I think it's really some truth here. Because there's things money can't buy. It can't buy Christian character. It can't buy loyalty. It can't buy security. It can't buy sincerity. It can't buy a place in heaven when you die. I read a kind of a sad story about a wealthy man who was dying. He had cancer. He had a little daughter about 3 years old, and they were trying to explain to her and trying to help her understand. And she came in and visited her daddy, really almost on his deathbed, and said, Daddy, are you going away? And he said, yes, honey, I'm going away, and you won't see me again. And she stopped and she thought, and she said, well, when you get there, have you got a nice house and lots of friends waiting for you? That very successful man was silent for a moment, and he thought to himself, what a fool I've been. I built a great empire down here, but I'm a pauper over there. Maybe that's what happened to Zacchaeus. Maybe Zacchaeus began to realize that his wealth couldn't buy him a clear conscience. His wealth couldn't buy him a place in heaven. What did it matter what he had down here? What did it matter what people thought about him if he didn't like himself? You had to be a thief and a liar and a scoundrel like Zacchaeus. I mean, and you couldn't buy true friends, and you couldn't buy a clear conscience when you went to bed at night. What did it matter? On a more funny note, I read a story about how the conscience works. Now, you kids might not recognize this, or not, I don't know, we'll see. The story goes like this. It was down in the Deep South, and they were having a revival service, and they had a missionary in, and they took missionary pledges. Now, most people didn't have much cash money at that time, so most of them might pledge a pig or a cow or something like that, you know, to give, you know, to sell, so they give the money to the church. And there was a guy in the church that pledged that he would give a calf to the missionary department. But then cattle prices went up and didn't want to do it because he was going to make quite a bit of money off that cow, so he kept it. And he felt terribly guilty about it. He got to where he didn't even want to go to church because he felt under conviction. And one day they were having service on Sunday night, and the windows were open, and he walked by and he heard them singing. And suddenly he got under so much conviction, he ran in and he said, all right, I'll give you the calf, I'll give you the calf. Quit singing about it. And they said, what? What are you talking about? He said, well, I heard you singing, the calf has never yet been sold. Now, if you know the song, they were talking about heaven where it was saying, the half has never yet been told, but his conscience was so bad, he thought they were saying, and the calf has never yet been sold. Now, I don't know, I mean, the conscience will get you. And I think it's what happened before Zacchaeus. There's a poem, I think, that expresses Zacchaeus' thoughts well, and it goes like this. I have to live with myself, and so I want to be fit for myself to know. I want to be able, as days go by, always to look myself in the eyes. I don't want to stand with the setting sun and hate myself for the things I've done. I don't want to keep on a closet shelf a lot of secrets about myself and fool myself as I come and go into thinking that nobody else will know the kind of person I really am. I don't want to dress myself up in